This video is pre-recorded pursuant to the requirements set forth by Measure M. My name is Jason Benitez. I am the Oxnard Police Chief, and today I am presenting an informational video on AB481. Assembly Bill 41 involves the funding, acquisition, and use of military equipment requirements for law enforcement agencies. Over the course of several years, criticism and debate has spread across the nation concerning the perception of policing in America becoming militarized. A key part of this discussion centers around the use of military equipment by law enforcement agencies, also known as LEAs, including the regulation and accountability for agencies that use such equipment. This includes the funding, the acquisition, and the use of this equipment by LEAs. Over the past several decades, many law enforcement agencies across the United States acquired a variety of military surplus equipment from the federal government and incorporated their use into their operations. The federal program that currently hosts this provision of equipment is the Defense Logistics Agency's 1033 program. Other forms of this program included the former Defense Reutilization Marketing Office, referred to as DERMO. Generally speaking, the equipment that was furnished to law enforcement agencies was intended to be necessary or beneficial to operations. It was intended to improve the safety of officers as well as the public and helped agencies acquire such equipment in the face of limited budgets. The materials provided by these programs were very diverse and included items ranging from office furniture and equipment to gas masks and rifles. These programs also furnished civilian type vehicles as well as military purpose ones known as the High Mobility Multi-Purpose Wheeled Vehicles, or Humvees. I'll show you some pictures, or you may have seen pictures at some point in time. At some point during the past 2 decades, larger 12+ ton mine resistance ambush protected vehicles known as MRAPs were also furnished to a small number of LEAs across the country. In previous years, the Oxnard Police Department accepted a limited variety of items, including M17 gas masks, like you see in the picture here, older generation rifles, like you see in the picture here, which are post-Vietnam or Vietnam era rifles, and rifle optics. These items have since been liquidated from the Oxnard Police Department's inventory. The police department never requested nor received Humvees or MRAP vehicles, as I previously mentioned. The Oxnard Police Department no longer obtains or utilizes any equipment from such programs. On September 30th, 2021, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed legislation aimed at reforming law enforcement agencies' funding, acquisition, and use of specific types of quote-unquote military equipment. This legislation is referred to as Assembly Bill 481, was authored by Assemblymember David Chu to address and regulate the funding, acquisition, and use of military equipment by LEAs. Effective January 1st, 2022, AB 481 is codified in the Government Code sections 7070 through 7075. AB 481 obligates law enforcement agencies to obtain approval from their applicable governing body, in our case, the City Council, via adoption of a military equipment use policy by ordinance prior to the law enforcement agencies funding, acquiring, or using such equipment. And for simplicity, I will refer to the terms the policy or the ordinance in this presentation as we go through it. Law enforcement agencies must begin the process to have their governing body start this process before May 1st of 2022 via adoption of the ordinance. This means a few things. The police department shall develop a department policy that governs its use of military equipment. This policy must also include an inventory of those items or material that is deemed by AB 481 as being military equipment. The policy can be found in the Oxnard Police Department's Policy Manual, Section 708. This policy shall be posted on the Oxnard Police Department's website. The link here is on the slide, and if at the time of this presentation recording, it's not up there, but it will be up in the coming days. And also, future acquisitions of military equipment will require a further public meeting, a policy update, and subsequent council approval. Law enforcement agencies must produce and submit an annual report to their governing body. So the first report for Oxnard Police Department should be sometime during the spring of 2023. This requires the governing body to annually review the ordinance and either A, approve or disapprove a renewal of the authorization for a type of military equipment, or modify the military equipment use policy. Prior to submitting the annual report to council for review and consideration of approval, the police department must hold at least one community engagement meeting within 30 days of submitting the annual report to the council. What is important to note is that under AB481, the term military equipment expands beyond equipment that has a clear application to military use. It also includes, it goes well beyond the DERMO program or the 1033 military surplus equipment program. And so you can see this in Government Code Section 7070C 1 through 15, and I'll get to that one in a moment. Military equipment does not include general equipment not designated as prohibited or controlled by the Federal Defense Logistics Agency. In other words, as I mentioned, it goes beyond these military surplus programs. For intents and purposes of AB 481, the term more broadly applies to 15 descriptors or categories of equipment types, some of which are not typically used by the U.S. Armed Forces. Other items deemed to be quote unquote military equipment per AB 81 also include equipment such as rifles and unmanned aerial systems known as drones that are also available to the public by retail sales. Under AB 481's 15 categories, the Oxnard Police Department possesses equipment from only 7 of them. In this presentation, I will provide you with an overview of each of these 15 categories, as it is important for the public to hear and know as much as possible about this equipment and how they are of great importance to the safety of officers as well as the public that it serves. Taking a look at the first of the 15 categories, the first being unmanned, remotely piloted, powered aerial or ground vehicles. So in terms of the police department, this includes the Oxnard PD's unmanned aerial systems. The Oxnard Police Department has been employing unmanned aerial systems since 2019. These systems, known as UAS, are easily deployed and they can perform a variety of functions that a helicopter would serve and at a fraction of the cost. UAS have demonstrated their value to public safety and have become increasingly more necessary as they can provide visibility and overwatch at high-risk incidents or locations. They can assist officers in perimeter searches, increasing the possibility that outstanding suspects can be safely located. UAS are also designed to enter small spaces, such as enclosed structures, as well as to provide overhead observations of wooded areas and other structures located in often crowded spaces. They are often useful in documenting crime scenes and traffic collision scenes, significantly reducing the amount of time to accomplish this. All of the Oxnard Police Department's UAS personnel receive initial and ongoing training to operate this equipment. They must pass a certification course and must earn a certificate from the Federal Aviation Administration. All UAS flights are documented with flight logs, and the police department's policy expressly forbids arming or weaponizing such equipment. The police department has not received a single complaint about its use of UAS since their first deployment in 2019. There are no reasonable alternatives that can perform these functions served by this equipment. Without the use of a UAS, officers would have to more frequently place themselves amidst high-risk situations, which would naturally increase the risk of the officers and to members of the public. And looking to the right on this slide, unmanned ground robotic vehicles are used for reconnaissance during critical incidents to assist in providing visibility in areas where it would be unsafe to send a person. This equipment enhances the capability of SWAT and other tactical response teams by allowing them to quickly and safely inspect dangerous situations and eliminate the need to send a person in before assessing the situation. Such systems can also be used to examine, to move, or to defuse potentially hazardous items. There is no alternative to this type of system for these purposes. Not having access to high risk. 2, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles or armored personnel carriers. The police department, as I mentioned, does not possess any AMRAP vehicles. Category 3, high mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, which is also referred to as Humvees, 2 and 1/2 ton trucks, 5-ton trucks, or wheeled vehicles that have a breaching or entry apparatus attached. The Oxnard Police Department possesses 2 armored rescue vehicles, as you can see in these pictures here. The one on the left was purchased in 2006, and the one on the right was donated to the police department by a nonprofit in 2021. Armored vehicles are used to provide ballistic protection to officers and citizens during rescue, critical incidents, and other hazardous situations. These armored rescue vehicles, they're known as ARVs, are used by the police department, are both from the Lenco Bearcat series, and they are built on a commercial vehicle chassis and are primarily reinforced civilian commercial vehicles. These vehicles allow officers closer access to high-risk situations while substantially reducing the physical risk to the officers and to citizens. They're typically deployed on SWAT operations, such as in the service of high-risk warrants or to incidents requiring a tactical response. They're intended to serve as a rescue vehicle in the unfortunate event of a downed officer or person in the immediate dire need of rescue. As such, there are no alternatives to providing the same level of ballistic protection. The police department's 2 vehicles, as you see here, are used commonly and possess no weapons on them. The one on the right does possess a breaching apparatus that can be extended from the bumper of the vehicle. However, these are the only 2 vehicles that we have in our inventory. In the next slide, you can see a practical example of the ARV in action. This video was taken from a helicopter during an incident in East Oxnard a few years ago, where an armed gunman had run into a residence of people that he did not know after exchanging gunfire with one of our police officers. The family retreated up into a bedroom where they locked themselves in as the gunman remained downstairs. The ARV was used in this case to actually evacuate the family, and that's actually what you see this vehicle doing here. You have some officers that are covering the front window with a ballistic blanket to provide cover from gunfire as the children are being taken to safety through the hatch in the ARV. Next section involves tracked armored vehicles that provide ballistic protection to their occupants and utilize a tracked system instead of wheels for forward motion. Our department simply does not have equipment from this category. Command and control vehicles that are either built or modified to facilitate the operational control and direction of public safety units. Now, these typically would not be considered to be items from the military, as you see that they have no armament or armor on them whatsoever. The police department has 3 categories of equipment here, and you can see them: the mobile command post, the SWAT van, and command vehicles. The police department's mobile command post, also known as the MCP, is an unarmored vehicle. It is the equivalent to a commercial recreational vehicle. We acquired this equipment in 2001, and it is equipped with radio communications and audio visual equipment to assist in commanding and controlling special events, critical and non-critical incidents, and disaster scenes. The MCP can serve as a backup dispatch operation in the event of a catastrophic failure at the police department's headquarters building where our communication center is. This vehicle also allows for mobile incident command and the use of the incident command systems, facilitating the best possible near-scene decision-making. It provides mobility, sheltering, logistical support, restroom facilities, and electrical power. There is no alternative for having an MCP, which provides the same amount of mobility and support at one location in a quick deploying package. The SWAT van is another vehicle that we have. It is used to transport SWAT and tactical equipment. It also has radio communications equipment in it as well. That was also acquired in the year 2001, and so it's 21 years old. And we also have command vehicles, which are essentially sports utility vehicles or that are equipped with an extra radio in the rear portion of the passenger compartment. There is an extra mobile data computer that is affixed to the rear of that compartment as well. There are some drawers with office equipment and whiteboards that are used to draw diagrams and to note the positions of units during the command of tactical incidents. And typically these ones are on scene a lot sooner than the mobile command post, which actually requires a special license to drive. However, the smaller command vehicles, a standard driver's license is necessary. Some of our command vehicles that we have are sergeant's cars, which our field supervisors drive, that have this equipment that you see here in the upper right corner of the slide. And they're used to coordinate the initial response to some of our more significant incidents. Next category, weaponized aircraft, vessels, or vehicles of any kind. And a big strong note here that Oxnard PD does not have any equipment from this category. In section 7, battering rams, slugs, and breaching apparatuses that are explosives in nature. The Oxnard Police Department possesses a limited amount of equipment in this category, and this is the type of equipment that I'm talking about is what you see pictured below. Battering rams and breaching apparatus are typically used to defeat locked, barricaded, or fortified locations, allowing officers to conduct rescues or high-risk forcible entries. This includes, but is not limited to, rescuing hostages. These items allow peace officers to quickly enter a structure when time is of the essence. This would include, but is not limited to, situations involving a kidnapping or active shooter situation. In such situations, time is critical, and it would not be feasible to wait for other delayed access to the structure. There are alternatives which are used for lower risk and non-fortified situations. This includes handheld battering rams, but these are not deemed as military equipment by AB481. However, the alternative that you see here does not afford the same level of protection or speed that such equipment provides when necessary. As such, there's no reasonable alternative to the items when they are used and required. Next category is firearms of 50 caliber or greater. However, standard issued shotguns are specifically excluded from this subdivision, and of note, Oxnard Police Department does not have any equipment from this category. Also, ammunition of 50 caliber or greater. However, standard issue shotgun ammunition is specifically excluded from this subdivision, and Oxnard PD does not have equipment from this category. Specialized firearms and ammunition of less than 50 caliber, including assault weapons as defined in sections 30510 and 30515 of the California Penal Code, with the exception of standard issue service weapons and ammunition of less than 50 caliber that are issued to officers, agents, or employees of a law enforcement agency or a state agency. And what you see here are on the right are patrol rifles. They are semi-automatic 5.56 millimeter rifles, carbine rifles that are issued to our officers. They are not standard issue, so that is the main reason why we are declaring them under this provision. In any case, it's still better to declare them anyway, for transparency, as they are often seen by the public, and it is important for them to understand their purpose. These rifles, such as special weapons and tactics rifles and sniper rifles, enable officers, when in compliance with the police department's use of force policy, to address medium to long distance threats, or those threats who are heavily armed, armored, or both. In both short and long distance deployments, these rifles allow officers precision shot placement, minimizing the risk to officers and innocent members of the public. There are no known alternatives to these weapons that will provide the same level of distance or protection or precision. And the commentary on this is that we are coming across increasingly more heavily armed criminals in recent years. And perhaps the most notable event that we can recall in recent history, or actually going a little further back, was the North Hollywood bank robbery, in which two heavily armed suspects robbed a bank, and these suspects were carrying multiple firearms, including assault rifles. And based on the pictures that I've shown to the public at council presentations, or that we have posted on social media in our press releases, you can kind of get a sense for how many guns are out there, how many assault rifles are out there, that our officers need to have something that actually matches up to what they're facing. Next section, any firearm or firearm accessory that is designed to launch explosive projectiles. And Oxnard Police Department has no such equipment from this category. Section 12, flashbang grenades and explosive breaching tools, tear gas, and pepper balls, excluding standard service-issued handheld pepper spray. I'm going to break this down a little bit further. When you look at flashbangs, these are a distraction device that are used in order to disorient or divert a suspect's attention away from officers. This can allow officers to gain safer access to a high-risk situation, give the officers the initiative, giving them time to assess and analyze existing threats. This is a way to prevent injury to officers and members of the public. These devices can often lead to a safer resolution and allow officers to take a person into custody without force. There is no known alternative to a flashbang when it is necessary. Regarding explosive breaching tools, the Oxnard Police Department does not use those. We do not have those in our inventory. Moving along to tear gas. This device, tear gas, is a less lethal method used to address violent or riotous crowds when there is a risk of physical safety. Tear gas is also used to safely extract a suspect from a fixed location or a barricade situation, or to safely detain a suspect who poses a risk of violence to officers. Tear gas allows peace officers to deploy a less lethal chemical agent into a structure where other weapons would not be capable of doing so. These weapons are less lethal and afford peace officers with an added option to avoid lethal force use. When these items are reasonable and necessary for use, there is no other alternative. And one very important comment that I need to make here is that the devices that you see here up in the upper left corner of the pictures is a 40 millimeter launcher, which is used to launch the tear gas shell that you see there. As you go to the upper right of the corner, these are handheld tear gas grenades that can also be deployed. Of note, with Oxnard PD's history, When we use tear gas, it is typically in a SWAT setting where a person is barricaded inside of a structure, and we have exhausted other means to get that person to exit the residence. That is typically when tear gas is used. And it is very important for our community to understand that you see the pictures below here where tear gas is actually being deployed in crowds, where you can see people throwing rocks or engaged in other type of activities. But I want to emphasize here that I cannot recall a time in at least the past 20 years where the Oxnard Police Department has even deployed this type of gas into a crowd. Next item are pepper balls. This is essentially, it is a paintball gun, which is fueled by compressed air, CO2, and it shoots small balls that contain a pepper ball powder, which is used towards a target. These are often very useful for having people leave enclosed spaces without having to go the whole route with the tear gas. The pepper ball is usually very effective in doing so. And in doing so, it also provides the officers with another less lethal option, which is a way of discouraging the use of a higher level of force. Category 13, the taser, shockwave, microwave weapons, water cannons, and the long-range acoustic device. I'll just say this, that Oxnard PD does not have any such equipment from this category whatsoever. Number 14, the following projectile launch platforms and their associated munitions: 40mm projectile launchers, beanbag, rubber bullet, and specialty impact munitions, also known as SIMs. The 40mm launch, the Oxnard Police Department possesses equipment under this category, namely with the 40mm launcher and the impact munitions that you see here. The 40mm launcher affords the ability to use less lethal chemical agents or impact munitions. Again, this allows officers to address a threat from a greater distance and provides an alternative option for deadly force when reasonable. The clearly marked beanbag shotgun fires a less lethal 12-gauge beanbag projectile up to a distance of approximately 75 feet. This allows officers to confront a potentially armed or dangerous suspect at a longer distance and serves as a force option intended to not kill the target. Beanbag shotguns can and have prevented deadly force encounters. They have been successfully deployed by the Oxnard Police Department for over 20 years, with many instances that prevented what have otherwise resulted in a lethal use of force. When necessary, there is no alternative to these less lethal weapon systems. And lastly, this is the catch-all provision. Any other equipment determined by a governing body or a state agency to require additional oversight. So those are the 15 categories of what AB 481 defines as military equipment. And so what I wanted to do here is recap this and close this by telling you what we're doing at the police department. The police department is currently seeking the city council's adoption of the police department's military equipment use policy by ordinance and getting that process started before May 1st of 2022. When this is presented to the council may approve, they may deny, or they may request a modification to our policy. The policy will also have a full inventory of AB 481 eligible equipment attached to that policy. And this policy, also, as I'd mentioned, Section 708 of the Oxnard Police Department Policy Manual, shall be made available online on the Oxnard Police Department's website. We have it. We have a dedicated web page that is actually up and running now. The police department will provide an annual report to the city council each year, first being in the spring of 2023, along with an annual request for the council to approve the policy, which contains the AB 481 applicable equipment. And prior to that meeting taking place in the spring of 2023, The police department will seek community input on the policy within 30 days of submitting the report to the city council, and that will be in the form of a well-publicized, organized public meeting. So that concludes the presentation, and I will be here to answer additional questions. Thank you.